Michiel van Reenen asked a very good question, and although I'm on the road, I thought I would do my best to try to answer this. His question was, if you're just practicing virtue in order to gain spiritual realization, isn't this just another form of clinging? Isn't this just self-concern? And it's true, this is not a pure motivation. So to answer this question, then we'll first look at the Bodhisattvas, because they have the purest type of motivation. Their motivation is to gain liberation from samsara and complete Buddhahood for the benefit of sentient beings. And it's said that a Bodhisattva will never practice virtue in order to seek reward or repayment in this lifetime, not even seeking your thanks, for example. And also, they will not practice virtue looking for the ripening of their positive karma in future lifetimes. So this is what we call a very pure motivation. Now, we are ordinary beings, and so it's difficult for us to have this kind of motivation. And so how do we need to think? Well, in order to answer this, then I'm going to refer to a teaching that the Buddha gave on the correct way to practice discipline. Now, this term discipline also means kind of like monastic vows. And so the Buddha taught that the most authentic way to keep discipline is to keep it having given rise to an uncontrived renunciation. It is turning your back on all worldly concerns and seeking liberation. This is what we call renunciation. That's why we're called renunciates. Now, it's very difficult to have this motivation. It's very high motivation, and I certainly don't have it. But the Buddha taught, even if you don't have this uncontrived renunciation, there is another authentic way in which you can practice the discipline. And that is practicing discipline, seeking the well-being of the higher realms. Now again, this is practicing discipline purely for self-concern, right? We're doing it so that we can be reborn in the higher realms and experience happiness. But the Buddha taught that this is also okay. As long as sentient beings are engaging in virtue and not causing harm, then that's a positive thing, right? I mean, I've said many times that there's nothing wrong with being a Christian or having theistic beliefs, because people who have faith in God tend to have good conduct. I mean, God says, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie. And if you keep this discipline, there's nothing wrong with that. And because of that, you will accrue a lot of positive karma, and based on that, you will experience well-being. And also, you won't bring harm to others. You'll only do good things. So this third type of motivation, authentic motivation, but not a very high motivation, is to practice discipline, seeking protection from fear. So what does this mean? Many people come to the monasteries from poor families, and it's quite likely that they're just becoming a monk or a nun so they can get fed, or that they can get an education. This isn't even thinking of future lives. It's only keeping the discipline, wearing the robes, in order to get food and clothing in this life, or maybe to get an education, get a roof over your head. But the Buddha taught that this is still okay. And it's okay because as long as you're keeping that discipline, you're not harming others, and aside from not harming others, you're actually practicing virtue. So we're ordinary beings, right? There's no point in trying to kid yourself on. We like it when people praise us, and also we don't like it when we're criticized. And as long as you have these sort of likes and dislikes, then you have self-concern. And actually, my opinion is it's better to recognize that we are motivated by self-concern, because then we can work honestly with that and try to develop a better motivation over time. If we try to tell ourselves or convince ourselves that we already have the highest type of motivation, then it's unlikely that we'll ever progress along the path. And again, the purpose for progressing on the path is not to have higher experiences of awareness or to practice stillness and rest in personal peace. The purpose for practice is merely for the benefit of others, with no self-concern whatsoever. But again, this is very difficult. And it's unlikely that there are many people who can actually do this. I mean, there are a few, and in the past we certainly have heard of many of these masters. But in general, the spiritual masters of the past were very humble. There is the famous story of Geshe Ben. One day, Geshe Ben was sitting in his meditation hut, and he suddenly realized that today his sponsors were coming. He looked around his room and realized what a mess it was, and quickly he went around tidying everything up. Then he caught himself and thought, "You're only doing this to impress your sponsors, you terrible monk." And they took a handful of ash and threw it all over the shrine to make everything filthy. And so, of course, when the sponsors came, his room looked like a tip. So there's many stories about Geshe Ben, and it's quite funny. But he's somebody who was learned and also had some level of realization. But he was always cognizant of his own faults. And so telling yourself that you're already a high-level practitioner isn't very beneficial. The masters of the past, they didn't do this. They chastised themselves. They were humble. They didn't see themselves to be special, but saw themselves to be ordinary. What we learn from these stories is it's better to recognize the faults we have and then to work with them, because in that way we can improve, and not improve for our own benefit. We have to improve because if we don't remove these negativities, we will continue to circle in samsara. And circling in samsara means harming others. It's not just about finding personal emancipation. As long as we're born in the mundane world, then we are complicit in the suffering of others. There's probably a lot more to say on this topic, and also there are many other stories about this Geshe Ben, but I think I'll save them for next time. And so that's all for today, and I'll see you later. Thank you very much.